Hi, and welcome to Sparkle Tart.
And this is Kate Palmer, and we're taking a look at the second part of my rusty mixed media card. And in this clip, we'll be looking at rust effects with pastes and paints. Now, in the first clip, I showed you how to make a really lovely textured mixed media background, and I used that to create a card. We're going to be using that background and that card as the base for this final layer of the project. So if you'd like to have a look, here's a link to the clip. We need to start by building an interesting collage on our background card. If you don't have what you need, you can always cut it out and make it. Cut leaves and flowers from scrap paper, use vintage or found items, and just add what you have. I'm using a variety of flowers, buttons, some elements from the Tim Holtz line, so the ornament frame and the little nib are from Tim Holtz, a variety of leaves that I've either bought or made myself, and a few odds and ends that I'm just sort of tucking in amidst everything else. And now it's time to start applying the rust effects paste. So I'm going to start with the brown rust, which has the coarsest particles. And I've just got some left on the lid, so I'll use that first. Now, if you would like any parts to stay peeking through, just don't add this too. Just making sure I poke it into all the little nooks and crannies. Now this stuff has quite coarse particles in there, so do not use your best watercolor brush to apply this. So if you would like to protect the background at all, just slide a piece of scrap paper underneath and pounce away. And that way you will get the rust paste on your embellishments but not on your background. Now make sure you turn it around and add the paste from different directions so that you end up with a really good coating. Now while you've got barely any paint on the brush, add a little bit of colour to the background as well, just to bring the layers together. And that's the first layer. Now when you start adding the second colour, just do it really sparingly. The red rust can take over really quickly if you go a little too heavy with the colour. Now all of the layers from here are about adding interest and building up that rusty effect and colour. You can just add the brown rust and the red rust if you so choose for your rusty effect. But I love the patina rust look, so I'm going to need to add a few more layers to build up that colour. And again, like before, scrape the dry brush over the background. I'll be using the rust effect paste called Gold Rust for the next little layer. Now I'm swapping from brush to a piece of sponge. So this was a heavy duty sponge and I've just cut it into little pieces. I don't even bother cleaning it between uses. Now this paste is much less coarse than all of the others. And I'm just applying a little tiny bit to the sponge and I'm just going to dab it over some of these higher areas here. Now adding all of this helps build the layers and enhance how this looks. Now you might need to go back afterwards and add a bit more darkness just to help finish it off. But it's all of these layers of colour that give you the most beautiful finish to your piece. Now just like before, I'm just going to add a tiny little bit to the edges. Now what I usually find interesting about rust is all of the colours that are in it. So I'm going to use my Art Alchemy paints, and I've got a light patina metallic, rich turquoise metallic and gold rush metallic. And I'm just going to add a little of these colours into the surface here. I might use that same little sponge, I think. Now what I've just done on the side there was just sort of squash that and mix it together. And the blue and the yellow are of course making a really pretty green. Unintentional, but thoroughly welcomed and completely gorgeous. Okay, I'm going to swap to the light patina. And each time I add a new colour, I add just a little bit less than I did the time before, just so it doesn't become too brightly coloured. Next, I'm going to add the Gold Rush. Now, instead of using a brush or a sponge for this, I'm applying it with my finger, just a little bit, for just a little bit of sparkle and shine. I've decided to add some Carbon Black Liquitex ink. The background just wasn't looking rich enough for this card. So I'm going to dab the ink on, just like we've done previously with some of the other ink colours, and spritz it with some water to make it spread and bleed. Add as much or as little as you like, but this will add some depth and richness to that background. And of course, if you feel like it's too much in any one area, you can always just dab a little bit off. And of course, leave it to dry. I'm going to flick over a little tarnished brass. And because the background's still wet, this will bleed out a little bit and spread. And then I'm going to go back in and add a little bit of the red and brown rust paste back into the design. And this is where the design is now at. Now, because you've got all of those amazing colours layered on top of each other with that rust paste, it really does look almost like rust. And now it's time to make sure that your Rust Effects top layer really pops. At the moment, it looks gorgeous, but it doesn't really leap off the page. So I'm going to add a few extra elements to make sure it's the star. And to do this, I need to create some form of separation between the top and the bottom layers. Now, to do this, I'm adding the light patina onto my background. Now, this is not quite dry, it's a little bit damp. And what I'm doing is sort of dabbing and painting it on in a halo around the embellishments, and then spritzing with water to make that colour run and bleed. Now, if I add more water, the acrylic paint spreads and wicks, and I get more of the shimmer from the paint. If I add less water, then I end up with more blue colours, more shimmer, and more intense effects. So I'm varying what I do. In some areas, I'm adding the paint more thickly, still with water underneath so it wicks, and you get that blue tone. In other areas, especially towards the outside of the card and towards the edges of the card, I'm adding more water so you get more of just the shimmer look, so that it almost has a halo around my embellishments, which separates the background and the foreground elements. Is it just me, or do you guys have those moments where you do something that makes it look so pretty that you just want to squeal? Very, very girly squeal too. Now, this next step might not be necessary, but I've added some Art Alchemy metallic wax in the colour Bronze Age. I've used my finger to apply this and just swiped it over the top of the flower petals and some of the raised textural areas on the ornate frame, just for a little something extra. You could leave this step out if you like. So I've got some little black beads in here for texture, but now what I'm going to do is add some of that lovely light patina metallic paint over the top, because that's going to show up a different colour on these little black beads than it does on the background. And I'm also going to add some of the metallic rich turquoise to further make that background stand out, or at least look different than these top elements here. So if you apply it into a wet surface, it wicks out and spreads and it looks amazing. If you apply it on a dry surface and then spray it, you get sort of little clumps of colour here and there. It looks equally amazing. This is just going to help highlight how different the rust section is from the rest of it. Now, once this dries, your background will be completely finished. It has had so many layers, but if you look closely at the background, you can see each element we've added along the way, and each one of those helps build that amazing textured, interesting background. Plus, it's a lot of fun to do. Add a little more of the Rust Effects paste onto your embellishments if you feel that it's needed. You could also add some hints of any of the acrylic paints that you've used. That now has a depth of colour and texture and interest that I'm finding really fabulous to look at. The play of the sheen from the metallic turquoise, which is a green, and the blue in the background gives this amazing patina but sparkle effect. Can you see why I like it? I have to let that dry, and then we're almost done. Now all I've had to do to finish this card off is add 2 word embellishments, a little love light bulb and a little copper brassy looking thing that says wish. I've mounted the card on a really neutral background, so it's sort of like a putty colour with a black card to back it, just so that that front panel with all of our beautiful, beautiful layers and colours is the absolute standout, and it's all finished. Look at that colour and look at that texture. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will be back with more very soon. Now don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more as soon as it's live. Bye!